Alright guys, welcome to another channel episode. Remember, this is a channel where we talk all about how you don't need to be a CEO in order to have some impact on the world. And in this video, I'm going to bring you an update that's really interesting. I was able to talk with a guy that I've met on LinkedIn, and we connected, and after a short talk we decided to have a phone call. Now, before I go more into depth about that, I just want to say that this video is going to mainly focus on what I learned talking to this guy named Eric, and how to go about, making these connections and what they're useful for. Alright, now that I got that out of the way, let's get started. So, the other day I was going through LinkedIn, and while I was on LinkedIn, I was mainly going through jobs, and I got distracted and I went through my feed. And the feed can sometimes be a distraction, but other times can be good because you can meet new connections like I did. So it turned out that one of my connections, a friend actually, liked a post of some other dude named Eric. Now, I decided to read the post and see what it was about, and it was this guy who does machine learning DevOps, or an MLOps engineer, and he was talking about how he really likes to give back to the community. Now, I know you guys have heard me say this before. The data science community and the ML community has just been just amazing. I'm transitioning from consulting, where things are a little bit more quiet and people don't really share a lot of the things they're doing, but things like data science really runs on people giving away their ideas and open source and people building on that. It's really wonderful. And so this guy was part of that community, and he wanted to give back. He wanted to talk to other people. So he decided that, because it's quarantine, a lot of people are still working at home. He was working at the office, and so he had to drive back home. That's around 45 minutes to an hour, that he could talk with someone else, and he could just meet with people, see what other people are doing. And I thought, wow, that's a wonderful idea. And wait, why don't I message him and hit him up, see if we can talk? Because, I'm looking for a job. I'm looking to learn more about the industry, specifically MLOps. It seems like that's part of the industry that there's still not a lot of data on how to do it. People are still figuring it out. So I thought, hey, let's message the guy. So I messaged the guy, and he responded, and he connected, and he was like, sure thing. And then 3 hours, 4 hours after, he's like, I'm going home right now. Would you like to talk in 5 minutes? And I said, sure. And I sent him my phone number. I sent him my phone number immediately because I did not want a second to go by and that, to miss the opportunity. You really want to lower, when you make new connections, you really want to lower the barrier of entry. So, instead of trying to set up a Zoom call or a Google call or whatever, just send him my phone number. We can talk on the phone while he drives, and it'll be easy. So I did that. He called me within 5 minutes, and we started talking. So that was kind of like the story up to this point. And so now I'm going to talk more about what I learned while talking with him and asking him questions, but I'm also going to talk later on about how to make these kind of connections. Now, when we picked up the phone, immediately it was kind of like, how are you? What are you doing? Where are you going? Kind of situation, kind of setting the tone. And then I decided to lead conversation with, what does he do? What kind of tech stack does he work in? To kind of get my mind around, all right, what tools does he use? And just that was a can of worms, because, he started saying, I use Python, AWS, and then we talked about AWS for at least 10 minutes. So that was kind of, a can of worms and a great question. And I just kind of wanted to understand, what is the process of MLOps? And while doing that, I learned a lot actually about the whole data engineering aspect, which it seems like MLOps is, it's very popular right now. It's a lot of people are working on it, and a lot of people are talking about it on the internet. And like I said, there's not really enough data. I'm not really getting a good signal on what it's really used for. And so it turns out it really just is, a problem of scalability and speed for models. And and making sure your models, don't expire, and your data doesn't mess up and things like that. And honestly, really, that's just system engineering slash data engineering. And so while talking with him, he actually started to say that, and I was like, oh yeah, so now this makes sense. This makes sense why, kind of like, this is really hot, but people are just calling it this fancy name, but really it's something as boring as, database management or data engineering. So that was a conversation about AWS, and while he was talking about AWS, he gave me really good tips of, don't learn a ton of other ones. AWS is the main one that you use. It's the cheapest one. It has the worst UI, which actually means that a lot of people are doing stuff like infrastructure as code. And so you may ask, what is infrastructure as code? Well, this is something I learned recently. So infrastructure as code is, you write scripts that run when you start an instance of, let's say, a Docker container or an EC2 instance on the cloud, so that you can set up your computer quickly. And not use the UI. So when I was starting up AWS, when I learned AWS, specifically EC2 instances or S3, a lot of that was using the UI. But I very quickly, once I started working on my projects, just started using the command line. And I had kind of like this script. I wouldn't run the script. It was more rudimentary than that. I just had like, a page on VS Code that had a bunch of commands, and also on Notion, actually, a Notion page with all the commands that I would then just copy paste in my terminal every time I needed to start a new instance and have it set up just the way I wanted it to. And so now I learned that that's basically, if you structure that correctly, that would be infrastructure as code. It allows you to skip the step of using the Amazon UI, which is always changing, and just make it, Unix bash based, command line prompt. So that was really interesting. And another thing I learned was about continuous integration and continuous delivery, CI/CD, I think it is. And basically, the idea of this is, for example, when I was working on a project like my NLP project, every time I made a new commit, I had to restart my instance or restart my script that was running. Specifically, I had a script that was running Flask as a front end, and so I had to turn it off and turn it back on. Now, that's fine when you're working on a personal project, but when you're in production, you need something that's a little bit more robust, a little bit quicker, and a little bit more automated, so that anytime someone makes a commit that's useful, let's say you make a new commit for like a new button or a new model, and this happens automatically. Like the model gets updated every hour, and so you need to update the model that's running on the cloud. You can do something like continuous integration and continuous delivery, and some tools for this are Bitbucket and GitHub Actions. And the idea of this is also like you have a script that runs as soon as you commit new code. The script runs and restarts everything and make sure that the latest version of your commit and the master branch is actually what's running on your homepage of your website. And as a personal project, you don't really need to do this, but being able to say that you've done this before is what teams actually do on the job. And so that's gonna bring me to another point of there's still more to go over, the more things that we talked about, specifically hiring and interview questions and projects. But I just want to take some time off and talk about this important fact. Doing this kind of work beforehand, before joining a company, is a really good signal that you have worked with a production level code before, or within a company. Now, you might not have worked at a large company before doing software engineering like myself, but because you put the time in to learn things that are more like infrastructure as code or a cloud platform, to run your personal projects, even though they don't technically need it, they could be run locally, shows that you kind of know the end-to-end process of designing basically a whole full stack application. And that's going to be really useful for when you interview. So now let's move on to the interviewing. So he has been on the hiring team before, And something he mentioned before is you give someone an algo. I've told him that I've been studying algos for a while now, and it's been really useful moving on in interviews. And something he said is that, I'll give someone an algo and they'll solve it, and it'll be great because that's a signal that this guy knows what he's doing. But then I'll bring him over to the team and they'll start talk about his personal projects. When what they're looking for, what the team is looking for usually is, can this guy do the work that I need him to do now? Not like later, but like now. And that is actually, really tough, because if you don't have a good personal project that relates to kind of what they're doing, that's a much harder job to get. And it's much harder for the engineering team to be like, yeah, this guy, he definitely could do what we want him to do. And in some companies, I've heard, like such as Google, if all the engineers don't check off on you, you won't get the job. And I don't know what other companies do this, but it's something to think about, something to worry about. And so something he mentioned was that based on my projects, they're kind of, luckily my projects are set up in a way that you can very easily do this, kind of add this functionality to your app, even though it's probably not really going to be used. You can add it, and that will be signal to an engineering team going over your code that you've thought of absolutely everything, from continuous integration to continuous delivery to infrastructure as code to setting up a cloud platform to what cloud platform to use, and all. You've made these decisions before, and so you'll be able to make them on the job. And so that was kind of like the last point that we wrapped up with, was just like general interview advice and for projects. And he was very kind. He even said he'd spend some time looking over my code on GitHub and my projects and see what things I can work on to make my projects go from, a medium to an advanced level, so that, engineering teams can look at my code and be like, wow, we want this guy. And so he said adding things like, continuous integration, continuous delivery, or Docker, or Kafka, and REST API functionality. It doesn't have to be overly complicated, but just things that you've added that functionality to your app will increase, make it go from a medium to an advanced. And not only that, but doing something like unit testing is also a good sign, but not enough. Something like a functional testing, like, making sure that your website is robust and can handle a lot of HTTPS requests, like a lot of requests, a lot of gets, that all shows that, that you've thought about how your system can break and how to fix it. And so that was kind of our conversation. I'm sure I missed little things here and there, but for the most part, these were the big three things that we talked about. We talked about ML, mainly ML ops, and how that fits into everything. We talked about interviewing and how to fix your projects, and how important projects are for the engineering team. And then we also talked about some things I can do to improve my projects, but also just in general, like his job, what MLOps means, and what data engineering is, through, the things I mentioned, like cloud and Docker and things like that. So that was kind of my conversation. This is a nice short update on what I've been doing. And before I go, I just wanted to mention a couple of words on how I get these connections and how I do this using LinkedIn. So LinkedIn, I personally am not a big social media person. I don't have any personal social medias, but as for professional social medias, I use LinkedIn. I use it for jobs. I use it to find people doing interesting projects and talk to them. I use it to connect with my professors, especially, and experts in the field, and follow companies. And so I use it as a tool, and the most important tool, right, is your connections, or your network. And because this is a professional network, everything I do there is professional, very clean, concise, always good grammar, always, setting up meetings and coffee chats, but, never, and nothing like, oh, we're going to meet up at the club or anything, right? And so by having a professional, kind of zone, it allows you to talk to people and experts that that want to help other people. And like in my case, you can run into people posting about new projects, and you could talk to them about it and potentially get a job from there. And so what I do is I follow people, I follow connections and connections of connections. I go to companies that have recruiters, diversity recruiters, or head of data sciences, and if I kind of like them, I'll add them. I'll send them a short message being like, hey, this is me, this is what I do, I'm interested in speaking. And usually they'll connect with me, and now I'm plugged in with the head of data science at Airbnb, and he's just my connection. I can message him whenever I want. And that's kind of crazy. And so that's kind of like my little tip on using LinkedIn as a professional site. Super worth it, super necessary. And make sure to always be professional and add people you just find to be interesting, because maybe they find out that you're interesting too, and they'll give back. So yeah, so I just want to say thank you to all of you for watching my videos. Thanks, Eric, for connecting with me, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Right? See ya. Peace.